Hey there, YouTube. Welcome to King's Court. I'm Shrine King, and this is another guide slash review of a World of Tanks tank. And this one in particular is the Skoda T24 Czechoslovakian Tier 5 in World of Tanks. So, for those who are new and are not familiar, this guide review is to say, what's the strengths and weaknesses of the tank? Is it worth it? Is the line worth it? And then along with that, then get into more details specifically on how to play the tank for better performance in your matches. So the Skoda line, or the Czechoslovakian line, there's only one line right now, and it's the mediums altogether. They are known as high damage output tanks, so that is the big thing with them. So pros to this particular tank obviously is going to be damage and potential, right? Penetration is typically pretty good with it, and then on top of that, it also has decent speed, so it's kind of like a hit and run kind of tank, and it has decent gun depression as well. So things that are kind of going there is like the eyes are just okay, right? So like its ability to spot is only okay. It's not really good at it, but it's not very weak at it either. Camo is the same thing. It's just okay. It's not very great. It's not very bad, but it kind of puts you in this middle ground aspect. But the gun is definitely where it shines the most. So one, it's not necessarily going to be very high alpha damage. But the thing with it is it's pretty good, quick on its fire, and then usually has very decent penetration so that it's able to penetrate the majority of its targets. When it comes to cons, though, for this tank, it typically does not have armor. So even with depression, even with depression on the tank, when you are even aiming down, and typically that's usually where you get a good angle to boost your overall armor. This one does not necessarily get it, at least not so far in this line. So at tier 5, definitely not something I would really kind of base off of. But you'll see here I'm using a couple tricks that are pretty typical with all tanks. So for example, I was able to angle to the side, so I'm only showing my tracks, and got the guy to shoot at it. Even if he was able to hit my armor, it's still going to be deflection. Now, that is something also to note, right? So for this tank, it has enough millimeter armor that's probably not going to get overmatched, which means you can still use most of the tricks that you see in all the other tanks that you probably end up using. But other than that, that's really about the gist of it. At tier 5, it's not really that accurate. And the aim time is definitely something I wish it was like. Personally, I wish it was better. So those would be the things I would say are probably its weaknesses. So really, just overall, you're looking at high mobility, and then good damage penetration, and it usually has decent radio, so that way you can make sure to see targets that people are spotting for you. So I would really recommend, now bear in mind I'm getting into the guide side of it, I would really recommend that this tank be played more as an assistant type thing, a support tank. Like for here, I have a tank that's kind of rolling up. I'm in position. I've already aimed in. I'm just trying to make sure that if the guy comes out, that I can support him. And, kind of like this. So the sad part is he's going to die just from everybody else shooting him. But at least I was trying my best to be in a position to help him. And you are seeing that I'm doing the same lineup. Like I said, you can use the same tricks that most tanks use. So, getting the shot in, rolling forward. And that's the thing to note here. So like, if you are going to be in city fights and town fights, I do highly recommend that you do the same tricks that you saw that I was doing there, where I'm really trying to just kind of pop in, take a shot, pop out, make sure to get proper angling against my targets, so that way, if possible, they're just going to bounce. The angling on this armor, if you see it on the side there and everything like that, does allow you to do the part where you're like facing toward the building, you kind of roll back, take a shot, roll forward. And that allows for a lot of deflections. So one thing to note also as a guide, this tank would really have a bad time if a target is shooting down at it and that target has the depression to do so. So you'll see the top of it is very flat. the hull, the top of the hull, is very flat. You can even see the back part where you can see right into the engine compartment or vents, right? So you want to make sure not to let targets really stand above you. It's probably better if you're above them. But most cases, right, I would just pay attention, especially lately, so I have to say this now as recommendation. There is a lot lately of what they call lemming rushes. Basically, it's your entire team just really going to one side, like maybe one or two people not going, or maybe one or two people going to another side, but that's not enough to really hold a flank or even really fight on a flank. So because of your mobility with this tank, I highly recommend that one, well, I should say because of the mobility, the fact that you don't really have a lot of armor and it's really more of a supportive tank, I would say one, stick to your team. Even if it is lemming rush, I'd hate to say it, but really go with that side. Do what you can to support it as best as you can, help it break through. In the event people are pretty scared or looking like they're scared and they're trying to be too defensive in situations where you really have to push, this tank's actually good for that. Like, you're able to kind of rush out there, get a couple shots in, get into position to where enemies might have a hard time hitting you. And then you can always use the elevation, and depression angles to your benefit. So what I mean here is just hills. So you can see here I'm just using a hill, so I'm able to kind of like roll around with it. Now in this case, I'm actually trying to go for the enemy that's all the way over there. And like I said, the mobility on this thing is actually pretty good. So you'll see I'm actually going at 56 kilometers an hour. And it doesn't take that long to get all the way up there. But that's really the gist of the tank. So one, I would recommend keeping your high mobility, getting into spots that you should be able to get good crossfire into targets, and more like flank shots. Right? If crossfire doesn't make sense, we'll talk about flanking. Also, you can use it to kind of get into certain spots where people just don't really expect you. And if you see that there's a lot of opposition in one part, you can always move to another side. That's the best part to me about this tank is, and actually so far the line, right, is it's really mobile, so you're actually able to just go from one side to another. It's very similar to certain other tanks, such as like the Progetto, as some people might know, where that tank is able to just get around really quick. So if you're losing one flank, doesn't really matter. You can go to the entire other flank and help out, and then still run away from that flank if it turns out it starts falling apart too. So like I said, you'll see here, I don't even have all the best stuff unlocked. Eventually I did, and it's still all the same stuff. So the alpha damage is pretty nice. It's not crazy, it's not like super huge, but it's nice. And then the part that really makes it good is the higher penetration values, which makes it to where you can steadily and repeatedly hurt targets more often. That allows you a lot more potential with damage. Now, here's another fight. So I'm going to kind of try to just talk point through the fight and explain the ideas and thoughts behind it, and hopefully this actually helps you. Now, I am doing something a little different than a lot of my other reviews and guides. I kind of always give like a high level, I guess, kind of summarization for you, and it's usually really quick, so that way the video doesn't take all that long. Which normally comes out to about an 8-minute fight is what would be playing in the background. In this case, I have a 15-minute engagements, because it's actually 2 separate engagements. So with that said, please let me know, if you like that, if you think that's good, if you want like more commentary, kind of explanation of things that are going on in the fight, and I can try to make sure to do that. So basically, it would be like first 7 minutes is really the pros, cons, and kind of like, or I should say the review, and then a guide, or a partial guide or a high summary guide, and then going into like a more detailed oriented guide. So here you'll see on this map, I do have there's like the left side, the right side. If you're looking at the mini map, right, and you'll see here I'm actually going to the far left side, which is the west side, where there's a lot of hills, and also not only that, but typically it's a side that usually you're supposed to have like lights and mediums, and maybe a few faster heavies would come this way. And if you're looking at the mini map in the bottom, you'll see that actually it turns out it looks like there's a lot of my allies kind of just spread out and went out into one other side. So I already see that there isn't going to be a lot of support on this side. So that's one thing to bear in mind when you're playing your tank. Just pay attention to that mini map. Kind of make sure to see, hey, you know, is it like, is my team there? Can I really rely on support? Should I be hitting that T key to let people know, hey, shoot this target? Well, in truth, in this case, there's no real point because I don't really have enough people here to shoot the target, so not really that great. But again, like the angling for this, the accuracy on the gun, especially at this distance, right? And then the aiming, or yeah, the aim time, and then also the mobility, being able to kind of roll up, take a shot, roll back. You'll see here I'm using it to the best of my potential here. So, and I'm using the slant of that hill to my advantage, so that way I'm not really showing a lot of me. Maybe a little bit of my turret, that's about it. You'll see here I'm doing what I can to try to pick out where I can. And like I said, the radio is pretty good on this thing, so you can see it's actually able to go there. And then here I'm noticing, oh, well, apparently not, now I have someone firing from the other side there. So here I'm just trying to keep him spotted, right? So bear in mind, not all spotting requires that you actually just be looking at the target. If you're close enough to the target, you can actually keep them spotted by proximity, right? Because if you're too close to the target, you'll automatically be spotted, no matter what. So here I see, okay, he's paying attention to somebody else. I can go ahead and take a little bit of an aim there, go ahead and get a shot. And actually, you know what? It turns out he did not decide to, you know, roll back right away. Now, had he rolled back right away, he probably would have survived. That was kind of shame on him, but he probably wanted to make sure he got some of that damage in. So here again, I'm like, well, I can go ahead and roll out. I know there's a T67, take that shot, roll back. And again, like the guy that I was keeping proxied, well, he's now dead. So my team actually was able to help me and get a shot on him. And I see here, well, look at the minimap, right? Well, it looks like there's only like 2, maybe 3 bad guys over here, at least that I know of. There's maybe 2 farther back, but that hill that they were using as like their engagement point, I'm pretty sure it's kind of lost. Now, here's that same T67, right? He's rolling up. Now, bear in mind, the video I'm talking about, this is a 4v9 here, right? So like we've only killed 4 people. They've killed 9. I actually have killed one of them. Now I'm sorry, 10. So things are not going good, right? That side that had the most of our players, turns out that side also lost the most because they were all there. That is one thing to note. In case there's an event that maybe it's not bots, maybe it's all players, please bear in mind, players, if you all go to one side, you are actually making it to where it's a lot easier for people to shoot you because it's making it target rich. And sadly, especially if it's somewhere where it's kind of closed quarters and stuff, which most likely was happening over there, more often than not, you're probably blocking someone's shot than actually making sure to get shots out. What people do is kind of like this, where they're focused in and sniping. They don't see the people around them. They're not actually going to scroll out and check around and stuff like that. You'll see I typically scroll out and check around and kind of see what's going on. Most people don't necessarily do that, so what ends up happening is if you're in larger groups, you block shots pretty often. That, or make it even worse, you actually take a shot from your friendly into you. So you'll see here again, like I said, the full aspect of this tank, right? It's damage output. It's able to put it out there. 1,300 damage for a tank that's only got like maybe 500 hit points. That's pretty awesome. So this line definitely is worth it. It's so far has been a lot of fun. I do know as you get farther along, it does start getting into auto loading, and it actually has a much higher damage potential, but it's still the same thing. It's very fast with good damage potential, but everything else is still, like I said, kind of mediocre. So again, this is gonna kind of finish up, and then you'll see the results. And I hope you guys really enjoy this. And please let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, and then I'm looking forward to you watching the next one.